Who's this? Who's this? Dude, with the jacket, you go cover back in here, okay? Shut all the doors and keep an eye on them, and the back here. Yeah, that's right. Take your jacket off. That's real helpful. Whoa! Who's that? Whoa! No, you just got our friend!
What?
He doesn't even have a Moses, man!
My fucking torch was facing down because I have the weapon out.
Okay.
Scumbag Hicks.
People... No, that's not Hicks's fault. For sake, if you're gonna run inside the building, at least announce it.
Greetings everyone, we're here for the PAX Online panel Survival of the Fittest to talk the origins, present and future of the survival genre with two titans of the genre that probably don't need any introduction, but we'll do one anyway. Brian Hicks and Dean Hall.
Hi, I'm Brian Hicks. I was a creative director on DayZ and one of the founding voices in the Battle Royale genre. And I'm currently working with Dean here as the executive producer on Icarus at Rocketworks.
Cool, I'm Dean Hall, otherwise known as Rocket. I made the DayZ mod and sold it to Bohemia and then worked with Bohemia to deliver the standalone. Left there somewhat notoriously and set up a studio called Rocketworks and tried to apply all the lessons we learned in this new video game, Icarus, that Brian's our EP of.
Cool. So we might as well start at the beginning. How did DayZ mod come about in the first place?
So I was in the army. I'd been in the industry previously. I actually got my start making aircraft for Flight Simulator, so it's kind of cool that Flight Simulator is sort of in again. And I ended up working at a studio in Wellington, here in New Zealand, as a producer. But I actually got out of that and went back into the military. And it was while I was in the military, I'd been working on this sort of training tool for soldiers that ended up becoming the DayZ mod. And I actually released it while I was working at Bohemia on Arma 3. And life kind of flipped over and changed at that point and focused on DayZ.
So what about you, Brian? What were you doing at this point?
Oh, well, I mean, prior to DayZ mod, I was just habitually kind of being a cog in the machine over at, what is now Xbox Studios. Then before it was Microsoft Studios. And at the time that I was there, Microsoft Game Studios. I distinctly remember around that time I had a nice subscription to PC Gamer. And they did a little snippet when the first buzz started building around DayZ. I've been a huge fan of zombies. And I see this little shot from the Arma 2 mod guys running around a house in this paragraph talking about looking for loot and it was marked, alpha, and I was like, because at that time I was working as kind of a technical PM for titles published by MGS, and I said to myself, I see this stuff every day. I see build submissions. I'm gonna wait until it's great, right? And then Twitch started making a buzz, so I start watching. This is like May, I think 2012, and I'm watching people play it, and I can't wait. And then, I fire up Arma 2, which I had for a while and never played because it was just a little too complex for me. And the rest is history. Like I got completely absorbed by this experience.
Yeah, and I think it was CH Kilroy's video. So basically, I'd been preparing this mod and, I talked with some of the people at Shack Tack as I was working on Arma 3. Just Lexi's a very famous member of the Arma community. And he's ex-military as I am, and as actually Brian is. And so I'd been talking to him about Arma 3, and I was like, hey, there's this mod I've been working on. I was employed at Bohemia as the multiplayer designer, but the multiplayer wasn't actually working. So, I'd been wanting to look into this large-scale multiplayer system that I'd worked on previously in my own time. So I was looking at applying that in Arma 3, and I talked to Dyslexi, and I said, hey, do you guys want to try out something fun? And I've been working on this mod. So, and actually how I released it is I made a server name. This is before the CH Core thing. I made a server name and I put the Mediafire, because Mediafire was a thing back then. This is quite a while ago. And I put that. I just said like DayZ Zombie Survival. And then I put the Mediafire in it. And I remember there was a moment when some random person joined it. So someone went into their browser and like alt-tabbed out and had to type a media file link in, download it, joining with not knowing whatever this is at all. And they played for like an hour and then died and left. So I wonder who that person is. There's someone out there who was that first one. Then basically that weekend we played with ShackTack, a full server. And I think it was at that point I was like, this is going to be big. But we really didn't have any idea how big. And I think that was something that really hurt us in the long run. Every time we'd make a plan, in like a few days, we'd kind of have to throw it up and rip it out. For a start, with Marit, CEO there, awesome guy, we had this plan that I was going to make a DLC for Arma 3 based on it. But that was when there was like 5,000 concurrents or something. And then by the end of the week, it was like 50,000. It got so big that GameSpy, which again was the thing back then, they actually turned off authentication, which broke the game at like midnight. And I remember raging on LinkedIn trying to get them to turn it back on. So GameSpy had to turn on their whole system, but de-authenticate everything. We broke that. We broke Steam's auth at one point. So it really spiraled out of control pretty fast. And that meant that all the plans we were making, they just became, we had to, rip up the plan and start again. And I think, that was one of the big challenges we faced very early on.
So now, sort of 8 or 9 years later, I think a lot of players have a pretty clear idea of what makes up a survival game. Sort of the genre's eventually defined itself. Do you feel like you went in trying to make that from the get-go, or was that just a result of it? It sounded like there was a lot of iteration through the DayZ mod stages to get to that.
Yeah, well, it was. And look, honestly, the time of iterating on the DayZ mod was probably one of the funnest, if that's a word, times in the industry for me. Because there was this real direct engagement with the community. Like I was talking directly with people, and that was how I'd run my little gaming group called USEC, this group of ex-military people. I would make mods for them and I'd talk directly with them, and people would give me ideas, and I felt like I was quite good at figuring out what was possible and working it in, and very pragmatic. And that it was kind of that, but like exponentially bigger. And I really enjoyed that engagement. And I think early on we just had this awesome rapport with the community, and then members of the community coming in, like Brian, and I remember when I met Brian at PAX, actually, it was Brian, and it was a whole bunch of him and a whole bunch of other people and streamers who ended up becoming super famous. We went to dinner and it was awesome. That was something that I just found super enjoyable, and I haven't really ever been able to get since. The latter part of the DayZ side, it all turned quite toxic sort of community-wise, but that early phase of the mod I think was great. And I think that was a reflection of how the mod was approached. Iterative, starting with a very straightforward pillar and holding on to those gameplay pillars. When we went into the standalone, originally I was going to follow that model. I sat down, started planning out what were the things that made DayZ mod tick, how could we dial in on those. And it was all looking good, sitting down, typing that all up. And then War Z happened. And, a bunch of other things like that. And I just became terrified that we were going to miss our chance. And so I kind of threw all that planning out and just started coding. And that was the worst mistake, really. I think that was the big one. Not spending that time to sit down and just analyze what made the DayZ mod tick and how could we capitalize on that in the standalone. There's a real teachable moment for everyone to look at that.
Because I was going to ask you about that. How did the fact that it ended up getting released, even though it sounded like you did have to rush things through at the end, what are sort of the key lessons that I think you took from that experience?
Well, I think the big one is really being really clear about what your product is, and I think that's super important with survival games. What is the pillars of the game, the experience and the feeling that you're trying to get through. And I think, I believe the reason that a lot of people really like the mod is, even though it's janky and it's got all these problems with it, and I think the Escapist or something, talked about it, feeling like you had a washing machine strapped to your back as you walk around. And this is all true, but it really brought through those feelings that you get. It was quite simple in that aspect. And there were just these many moments that people had, and everybody has their DayZ mod story. And without having that clear picture of what you're trying to achieve, you can kind of lose yourself. And that was what happened with DayZ Standalone. I became obsessed with solving modding, but actually I think in hindsight, solving modding via communities would be better. And Brian, you have a lot of experience with like GTA, RP communities and stuff like that. So those role-playing servers, even Minecraft servers, they manage that kind of stuff through whitelisting, blacklisting, stuff like that. So, managing, giving the community tools to manage antisocial behavior, I think is more effective.
So you talked about how important community was in helping you develop the game and evolve it. What do you think it was about survival games that made those communities grow so much in the first place? What sort of drew people in and made them commit that much to a game?
Well, I don't know. I would say when you look at titles like DayZ Mod or on into DayZ and all the other, like Rust communities, a huge successful game, and even GTA RP and Red Dead RP communities, it tends to really be about these shareable experiences, right? This, the designers or the modders that are working on creating this world, they structure the world, they create the tools, and a little bit of the incentive on the problems, but how that all works out, they leave up to the player. And you as a direct result, get experiences that just you could never come up with in a design meeting in front of a whiteboard. The players literally make just completely, in many cases, unbelievable stuff. Like you look at some of the YouTubers that popped up around DayZ Standalone's release, like Jamjar, for example, and his social experiment videos. The idea of handcuffing a victim, leaving in the middle of the street, putting keys and a gun down with one bullet in it next to it, and then he runs off in the trees and watches while talking to that person over like Discord or TeamSpeak. And that whole plays out like some random person walks up and the handcuffed and in some cases hooded guy screaming, "Help me, help me," and that person has to make a decision. Like, do I shoot him and take what he might have or uncuff him? It's brilliant, and you could see it in the views. Like, people just latched onto this.
I guess that kind of gets into something that I think a lot of people don't realize. If you look at the evolution, PewDiePie did a video on actually, the evolution from DayZ through to PUBG and then onto Fortnite. What I think that did is I see survival as this kind of river. There's a genre, and or at least a recent genre anyway. And if you look at, it's not hard and fast, but I definitely think that PvP branch of the river, through PUBG, through Battle Royale and events like Survivor Games, which Brian stewarded, and then through into Fortnite, that really took the feelings and the emotions that you get from games like DayZ, but it really packaged them very well in a way that you could describe to people exactly what their experience was going to be. And I think that's what really resonated with people with PUBG. Not only did Brendan capture that, but also iterated on it in a really great way. And I think that's what Survivor Games did too, although they were kind of hampered usually with me not having the time to give them access to the code, which I said I would and stuff like that, to support.
It was definitely an experience trying to build the idea around Survivor Games. I mean, I can remember from the get-go, coming from a background of game development and publishing, and Soma, Jordan Taylor coming to me in our streaming group, QuickNap Gaming at the time, and saying, we've got to. I watched this movie, Hunger Games, and it would be so perfect for DayZ. And everybody had this accelerated timeline, and no one knew a goddamn thing about scripting or dealing with databases or running any kind of even running a mod on a dedicated server. No one knew. The only person that had any experience with that was me. So it fell on me, right? It fell on me, and it was like being pushed into the deep end because I'd never dealt with SQF, which of course snowballed into the DayZ Taviana stuff and so on.
So SQF's the scripting.
Yes.
For
yes. The first run was a test run, obviously, the DayZ Hunger Games. But again, like all good mods, it was iterative, right? And we met up with you. You talked about having friends over at your house and watching on the TV like it was the Super Bowl.
I remember that.
And we iterated on even the name to make sure that we weren't locked into using someone else's IP.
That was my suggestion.
Yes, it was. It was. Talking to folks in the community like Sacriel, for example, who liked what we were doing initially with moving the players from region to region, but making it like a progression path, almost like the sequential circles. That was entirely his idea. When we were talking with him and other folks like Oshi and stuff in that group of streamers, thought it would be great. went to the code, made it happen, and continuing to iterate upon that idea from DayZ. What felt good about DayZ, the risk felt good about DayZ, and then you look to where Brendan took it with PUBG. Said, oh, that whole like last man standing risk works great. The looting works great. How can we make this commercial? And it really was about him identifying the long part of these 4-hour events was people looking for stuff, right? So let's reduce the time to empowerment. And bam, you've got PUBG.
It was honestly brilliant. And I think the brilliance of PUBG was recognizing these feelings that, people will be like, what are you doing, DayZ? Oh, you go get stuff, but why? And it really took away a lot of those questions because you can just very easily explain to someone what's happened. And I think you've seen a degree of cool iteration with games like Tarkov. And in fact, sometimes evoke Tarkov when we're talking about Icarus, the game we're making. Because basically Tarkov takes that experience but then sort of wraps in these bite-sized objectives into the whole mix of things, which I think's really resonated with people.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to look now back at some of the competitors we had in the Survivor games. I mean, even down to the Hunger Games, folks like Lyric, sure, he was big on Twitch at the time, but the definition of big on Twitch at that time is tiny nowadays. You got Lyric and Summit and people that have moved on like Puddin', and you've Anthony Kong fan and Psy Syndicate, Sacro, all these people managed to come together and I suppose you could say it almost led to people in that community, streamers and moderators around those streams getting to know each other, and friendships were made and communities were built. It was an exciting time.
You just made me think. I remember going to like Insomnia in the UK, and I run into Syndicate, and he comes over and he's like, hey, and I'm talking to him, and while I was talking to him, just constantly getting interrupted by people recognizing him. And he was like sort of semi-fanboying over me, but like none of these people knew who I was. But it was cool. And I think for me, one of the most awesome parts of DayZ is I can remember when it was just, like I can remember making the folder name, and I wanted something that was short. For the armor community, having a short 3 or 4 letter word was important for your mod. So I made this folder called DayZ, and so I can actually remember back when it was just this little idea, and then all the stuff that came out of that. I remember there was this guy, Jonathan, I can't remember his last name, but he hosted some of the early DayZ servers. I think he might have been 18, and his company ended up getting bought out by one of the large server manufacturers, made millions of dollars. So there's all these people and had all this awesome change in their lives, which was pretty cool. And obviously, massive change in my life as well. So it's kind of awesome to think that, I can remember that moment when it was just a folder on my computer while I was in Wairau running, doing my development off a cell phone dongle,
There were people that would join random DayZ mod servers around summer 2012 with the name Rocket 2 Guns, just to try and trick the administrators of that server to either shut it off or give them stuff or convince them they were going to get banned. I mean, you had impersonators running around.
Yeah,
I was still working on.
I got kicked out of a GTA role playing server because someone thought I was a troll. Yeah, I was pretending to be.
I did get my DayZ RP application denied at first while I was sitting in my office at BF.
I am looking for a GTA RP community to accept me, so if there's one out there.
just talk to Coil.
Okay.
I'm sure
we're
Coil
solving stuff here. We're solving stuff. So I think that sort of being there at that moment when it starts very cool, and I think it's something I really enjoy about the game community. But it definitely got very complicated with the standalone. And I think that was our big lesson, is not rushing, which is hopefully what we've brought through.
Stick to innovation.
Yeah, stick to what works.
So one thing about both Survivor games in general that we've talked a lot about, and Battle Royale more recently, all of the big success stories, the Arcs, the Rust, they've all sort of come from the DayZ, the PUBG, they've all come from sort of those smaller indie community roots, and there haven't been so many successful attempts at bankrolling a big one of those games and really getting off the ground. Have you ever thought about how you would approach that, given starting from a stronger financial position and having the runway and the time to...
Yeah, I mean, at the studio, you guys know, we talk a lot about the reasons we do things being written in blood. And that's kind of alluding to, have aviation military background, and aviation safety is written in blood. The reason we have rounded edges on the windows is because of cracks appearing in the framework and people dying as a result. So the reasons that things happen in aircraft is very deliberate, and it's kind of the same for us with our development processes. We've tried stuff, and often it's because of the failure we've tried to learn that lesson and said, well, let's not do it that way. So looking back at what happened with DayZ flowing through, it wasn't just about throwing money at the problem. A lot of it was about getting the best people who had experience. I talk about that sort of survival game, 1,000 Yard Steer. Adam, one of our designers, was a designer on Miscreated. He just brings huge value to the team because he's been through the trenches. He's got that. He knows it's not just a problem of imagination. It's not about having good ideas. It's about how those ideas can get delivered and iterated on. Most importantly, iterated on. And that's where we talk about at the studio, and now with Icarus, games are played, not made. Every Thursday we do our internal playtest, and it's about playing the game. And we look at it and we really just cut through and say, is this mechanic fun? Is this mechanic delivering the experience we want? And just brutal honesty with it. And I think that's been a critical lesson and part of our process. And I think if you look at DayZ Mod, that was what was fun about it. That was what was magical to people about it. And that was when the best stuff happened. And it was when we lost all that and got caught up in our own nonsense. I think we got punished by the community for it. And I think that is kind of where with the survival genre, particularly that other branch of the river. So, we've talked about PvP, and I think that if you look at the evolution through, PUBG and Fortnite, it makes sense and it's awesome. But I feel like PvE hasn't been looked at the same. So that player versus environment stuff just hasn't had the same treatment. And that's what we wanted to do with Icarus, was actually go through and really just give real treatment to those core survival mechanics. And that's been perhaps my biggest frustration with the genre, is trying to deal with that. And I know why we haven't as an industry, because it's hard. It's a different way of making games. It really is focused on the mechanics. You don't have things that can pull you through. It's not about pulling it through with a great story or a good cutscene. It really comes down to those mechanics. And that's very expensive, as we found. Having to get really good people. When we started out with Icarus, it was really clean slate with the studio. And hey, let's look at a real way that we can deliver this. We went out and got the best producers I've ever worked with, for sure, which Brian is one of them. And, we got a producer, Bobby, who I worked with 10 years ago on Clone Wars, which I got removed from as a credit, I might add. I checked on IMDb. I'm not credited with it, which is very punitive. But we work with really good people, and a number of very senior people came across from Grinding Gear Games who work on Path of Exile, and they've just been incredible to work with. And our tech lead, Ben Carnell, he actually wrote a book on Unreal Engine game development. And I remember you told me when I first briefed about the idea of Icarus, you actually told me I needed to talk to this person, and a number of people had said that. And I remember sitting down with him here in Auckland. We probably almost see where it is out there. And within 5 minutes, I was like, this is the person to make this game with us. He just really got that, what we should do, that feeling. He was sort of quoting the pillars that we'd come up with back to me. And that was a cool experience. And I think that looking at what DayZ was, where game dev tools are at now, I would approach it completely differently. But I'm just really enjoying working with such awesome people. And probably sit here talking for ages about just that strength of the team.
I would definitely echo that. I like the expression, I don't remember where I heard it as a kid, iron sharpens iron. And I have found, especially with the team that Dean has built around Icarus, coming on board and working with the other leads, I found a curiosity about what is fun about this, and a real fire in going out, finding the fun, and then looking at Icarus and how we play it and going, oh man, this could be a lot funner if we maybe went this way. Again, iterating. There's a lot of drive and a lot of love for the project, and I mean that just gets me even more fired up.
I think as well we learned that it's not just about having a group of people who are super passionate about survival games. So if you look at that, Some of our people are just professionals. Maybe survival games aren't their bread and butter. But that's actually good because we have a group of people who are kind of the sort of control group to just sort of test and balance our assumptions. And that's really been our process. We'll go through, we'll look at the games that are out there and we'll say, what's best in class for what we're trying to do here? And then we'll try it. And we've been able to work really closely with Epic, who have been fantastic. They actually have direct access to our source and are telling us, hey, you should use this like that. And just being able to have that level of engagement and support from an engine developer is just incredible. And has allowed us to just move so quickly towards it. You can kind of feel Epic's passion around survival games as well, which has just been fantastic. And all that together means that we've really been able to focus in on what I think the survival genre is missing, which is that iteration on the core survival mechanics. Simple things. How do you chop down a tree? How does it feel? How do you mine voxels? And I think there's so many cool examples that you can look at individually. I really like playing Deep Rock Galactic. It's got a really cool feel to how you mine. So we'd look at games like that and we'd be like, we really like how that works. How can we take that and apply it in the context of what we're making now? We're really trying to recreate that first night in Minecraft. And like on Brian's point about feelings, when you think about it, I don't know about your guys' feel. I can remember mine. I spawn in and people tell me what's happening and I'm like, oh my God, and it comes to night, you just dig a hole and you just all sit in a hole. Like, all you've done is remove a few blocks and sit in a hole, cover it up again, and you're like, oh my God, best game ever. And when you think about it, there's not much involved in that. It's really just all about feelings, and so much of it is what you create.
Dug in a hole.
Yeah, you dug a hole and you just covered it. And it's hard to do that. And we talk a lot about thanks, I hate it. So that's been a huge lesson for us, which is basically we'll make an assumption. We'll say, right, we're going to do this. We'll get the art made for it. We'll have the programmers develop it. But we all recognize that it might end up being, it's like, thank you, you have done everything we've asked. You've done it perfectly. You've done it great. But we hate it. It's terrible. And it was a bit of a meme in the company, but I think it really works for us because it really acknowledges that the measure of what we do is not by just achieving what we said we're going to do. It's the end result of the feeling. It's the Thursday playtest. And I hope that when people see the game that they'll see that.
I think it makes that criticism less personal as well. It's just if it's something as comical as thanks I hate it, it's directed purely at the result. So when you left DayZ, I think it was in a Eurogamer interview, you commented that you felt the game was fundamentally flawed. Do you want to drill into that at all? So what were the things you identified?
Yeah, I think a big part of growing as a developer, and even in any area of work or even just in your personal life, I find, is being able to go through what you've done and do this kind of after-action report and actually go through and pull it apart. I think being able to be a critic of yourself is super important in terms of being able to avoid repeating the past mistakes. In some cases, for me, repeating them twice. But eventually you learn. And I definitely remember it was back when we were first showing DayZ Standalone at E3. And, E3 is kind of this industry, was this industry expo. And so it's a lot of industry people, and we all like to sort of pat ourselves on the back a lot. And you see this a lot with a big game that's coming out, everyone's like, it's going to be amazing, and then it flops. And so, E3, everybody just loved to love DayZ. And I remember sort of in my head wondering about, but you can get swept up with it. So everyone's like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. It's huge. And everybody wanted to come see it. And I'd have Ubisoft coming over and inviting me into, secret viewings of their products. And so it was all very cool and exciting. But then it was when we went to Gamescom. And, Gamescom is a consumer show. So, a few months later, and we showed the game off. That was when I started to get the feeling of the decisions that I had made, how they had actually affected the game and the lack of focus on the pillars of the project, or the ability for us to have actually gestated those pillars of the mod, instead focusing on a very reactionary approach of development, had, come through and affected us. And, the consumers, they liked the game. And I think, we were talking before with the cameras, that there was a bit of a resurgence for DayZ. It's not that people don't like the game, but there were fundamental decisions made that limited where we could go with it, and they were made with the best of intentions. But in hindsight, they were the wrong decisions, and that's what I believe. And so it was at that Gamescom when I realised that. I realised that the decisions we'd made and the reactionary approach that I had taken decisions had negatively affected the potential of what we could do with the game. And that's hard. It's really hard to realise that. And I put like another year into it directly after that. And it's very hard, but you have to do that process. If you want to get better, you have to be able to do that. And it was walking back across that bridge at Cologne. I think it has like locks on it and stuff. Yeah. I was walking back across that bridge, and I did this sort of thought experiment in my head of what if we had learned those lessons, and what would it look like? And that was the first time that I had the idea for Icarus. And I went back to my hotel room and I just wrote pages and pages. Now, the problem was I identified there were a few key parts of the concept that didn't work, particularly the ability to scale. That was a big one. I didn't want to touch survival again unless I could guarantee to people playing the game that the game could scale with the experience. And I think this is the great filter, the big trap for survival games. You see this with damn near every survival game. It's very easy to get the first few steps out of the way. But once you've done that, eventually the game starts scaling, and both from a scale in terms of the inflationary effects of your economy itself in the game, so you're continually amassing stuff, as well as the technical impact with now the server has to calculate all that stuff. That's where things fall over.
Yeah, there was a lot of decisions made early on that at the time felt right. Like again, addressing security, trying to go in at the engine level and rip out the old render and write a new one, make the whole engine more modular, which RV is not known for being. RV being the engine that Arma 2 and Take on Helicopters is predominantly on. At the time, those decisions felt right, but looking back now, especially identifying what really works about the DayZ experience, we sacrificed a lot of our time and really handicapped the project to a point where it only now, because of all the tech work we undertook, the idea of doing everything, only now is starting to feel like it plays right, it looks right, it's smoother, and it's now this backlog of content since we divided forces and we're developing both engineering on the tech level and design, animation, and art, trying to put out all this content. Only now that stuff is able to be moved over, and it starts to resemble a degree of what we wanted to put out. And I guess at this point, looking back at that and looking at Icarus, I'm glad that has been one of the focuses that you've put the team on, is, set out that framework, be able to rapidly iterate content, to get new stuff out in the game without this massive tech problem that we have to solve. Like, look at what can be done with the engine and what has already been solved, and work off of that. And I think that in modern game development is really looking back at our roots coming from modding.
Yeah, and I think you have to be very sure about what you want to do if you're going to do that. And so we took the time with Icarus to sit down and say, what is this game? What are the pillars? What are we trying to deliver? And we could talk about that for a long time, but for me, the big takeaway for people watching is the idea of Icarus is to go back to those core survival mechanics. Simple things. How do you chop down trees? How do you mine minerals? And just that sense of building a cabin and surviving. That is survival. That's why I climb mountains. That's why I go ski in Antarctica. Like, surviving can be really thrilling. And you talked about feelings before, and how in Battle Royale, survival is thrilling and it's packaged well. We wanted to do the same treatment, but to PvE. And I don't think that anyone has really gone in and done that treatment. I think Ark did a really good job, but Ark's quite old now. And so we wanted to go back in and actually rethink that, and just being able to do that with these really experienced people from places like Grinding Gear Games has just been fantastic.
Yeah, I would say, not to jump ahead of any potential questions you have, Dylan, but when you talk about that feeling from survival PvP and not really feeling like survival PvE has been fully fleshed out thanks to PvP, as I've heard you say before, is effectively Battle Royale.
Yeah, it is. If you're making a survival PvP game, you really better make it Battle Royale game.
Exactly. One of the things that stands out is looking at the tension in DayZ, and even like, you said the first few minutes in Minecraft. Again, that tension comes from PvE. The first few minutes I had in DayZ mod came from PvE. I know there are other players out there, but immediately you're presented with noise and limited resources, environment, and the infected wandering around all the time. It's the first bit of tension. And when I look at, like, even this didn't occur to me in earlier conversations we've had about this, but one of the rare things that it wasn't really moved over to PUBG that was tension from survival games was, historically we always had an escape craft, and it's that rush as the timer's counting down to go to the escape craft. And watching, just in our playtest, like Rachel from Art and Animation, watching her and other people in the playtest, and I wasn't even in this one because at the time I was in isolation, but watching her rush against environment and against the timer, they're already at the craft. I don't know if she's gonna make it. I'm like cheering her on over this Discord stream. You can do it. You can do it. She's like, should I even bother? I'm like, if you fall down, they can come for you. And even they're getting involved. They're just sitting there at the craft, like watching her stream on Discord. Can she make it? No one knew. Timer's counting down. It was tense. It reminded me of that first time in DayZ mod, like run into a building and there's another guy there and we're both unarmed and there's zombies coming towards the door. And it was kind of like a bit of a copy pasta. He looked at me and he said, "Go, friend, be safe." And he threw himself at the infected as they're eating them. I'm running out. It was purely PvE tension, and I definitely think that is there. I felt it in Icarus, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can push that moving forward.
Do you feel like now that you're working in a company of your own, Dean, and you have that control, do you feel like that's going to be able to open up your options a lot more through development in terms of taking feedback and implementing it without being beholden to a publisher or other investors or
Yeah, look, I mean, actually it's super hard to get right. I talked before about design by constraints, and I actually believe design by constraints can really help you. In a situation like making the DayZ mod, you get given the constraints. You can't change the engine. When you don't have that, you have to figure them out yourself. And I guess it started with how we approached development. I sat down with Ben Carmel, our tech lead, and said, I want to make this game using the engine. I don't want to work against the engine. I don't want to work against the physics engine. I don't want to work against any part of it. I want to work with it. If we have to, making our trains in the game, let's make them by hand. What happened was when we started attaching, you talk about iron sharpens iron. When we started attaching really good people to the project, really good people started joining the project. We've got Ash who did all the UI for Path of Exile, and I remember, survival games have notoriously bad UI, and I was like shocked when I played Ark, and they'd taken my very rudimentary like icons in the bottom side, and I was like, I thought that was a bad idea when I thought like 20 people were going to play the game, but it works, and that's kind of the beauty of Ark, really. Like they just took stuff and they just made it work. And I think, but then working with Ash, suddenly it's like, instead of we're just doing functional UI, it's like, oh my god, like, Jake is a very senior programmer from Path of Exile. He came in with this clear idea in his head about how to approach inventory. So you have this awesome group of people who've been working together for ages, fresh into a new idea that's very clear and specific aim, and it's just like gives you goosebumps just watching them iterate. And I stepped back. Previously in projects, I would often code directly, and if I was having a bad day, I'd just bury myself in code. With this project, we said no, I'm not allowed to get involved in it. I think that's been really good. My cog in the machine is to play with holding us accountable to delivering on the pillars. To delivering the feelings we want, and being able to say that thanks, I hate it. That's my role to play, and I don't get hide away coding because I don't want to do what I want to do in that day.
It's a very cathartic experience now that I think of it. When you're presented with a problem in script and code, it's very it's almost binary to a degree. It's going to work or it's not. That's the problem you have to focus on. Whereas with these larger managing the project, managing the company, some of those solutions don't come around in a day of reading other examples and like Stack Overflow or bashing your head against a problem, rubber ducking it. It's a long path, and it's a difficult one to take. I know that feeling of wanting to just get in there and solve it yourself, and get that instant gratification of I made the weather great.
Yeah, which was I got an award for that. But you know, and I missed that. I missed the being able to go in and code directly. But I recognise now that was I was part of a significant problem that held it back. I needed that outlet, but the project needed me. It needed me to be an adult and step in. You know, I had the ability and the authority to step in and say, we did this wrong. And I think that's maybe my only role in the project. The most important one is to be able to step in and say, thanks, I hate it. But I think beyond that, it's then about being able to look at the concept and talk about it with the players. And I think this is kind of the start of that for us. It's something I do miss from, and I'm sure you do, Brian, as well, from the DayZ and Survivor Games days, is being able to have that engagement with the community. So we're pretty excited with Icarus to actually be able to start exploring that stuff, actually bring the community into dev streams, and do a lot of things that the big studios can't. We can actually get back to that. I'm pretty excited about that, and that has huge payoffs for us. We don't have to do early access and stuff then, because we can actually be getting the feedback from the players organically.
So DayZ and Survivor Games and stuff were coming up at a time when Twitch was fairly new as well, and has continued to grow monumentally since. Did you ever see sort of Twitch and online streaming getting to that point, or?
I don't know, at the start, probably not. Like 2012, when I was addicted to an unhealthy level of streaming. You know, I had my 40-hour work week job up the hill in Redmond, and I would go back down to a little studio I had rented across from Digipen off of Willows Road, and I've actually found VOD evidence of this. It's so unhealthy. I would start streaming from 6 p.m. and end at 6 a.m. And I did that 4 to 5 days a week. And the only thing I was playing like 95% of the time was DayZ Mod. I didn't necessarily see it blowing up to what it is today. I mean, you can make or break a game from stuff like from content creation on Twitch or YouTube. But as the ball started to roll, especially when we were, in Prague working together, I think it became very clear. And it became, to BI's credit, I think they started to recognize straight away the value of spending relatively a very small amount of money on marketing. And that directly went to you and I going and meeting people, streamers, fans at trade shows, us interacting in streams on Reddit, some terrible forum choices that you made back in the day. I don't know if many people could have predicted it. And I think the fact that you look at Twitch is predominantly, maybe aside from YouTube, and I guess maybe you could say Facebook, the only real players in this industry that has such a massive impact on the gaming industry, which is huge at this point. I don't necessarily know if that could have been predicted.
So back to talking about Icarus, you were saying that you have taken a hands-off approach to coding and you're just sort of playing the game and experiencing it and then commenting on it, making decisions based on that. Is this you making your perfect game?
No, it's come up in a pitch meeting once. No, it's not. It's not about that. It's about finding what works for this game. And I maybe this is getting old, but the thing that sort of attracts me most to it is how achievable it is. We're taking a bunch of things that have been done before, but we're putting them together in a way that hasn't. And I think from a technical perspective, that really interests me. Because if you look at the individual parts of it, they're all very possible. And we have some, the work that's been done on how we approach voxels and stuff has been amazing, because we've been setting, say, this benchmark here, and then the team exceeds it. And, you've got to watch you don't become victims of your own success there and end up, going too far and causing yourself issues. But it's been fantastic to see that process. But that's not been a process of let's make the dream, shove everything in game. No, that's not what it is. We are looking at the best in class for survival games, but trying to keep front and center and ahead. What are we trying to do? Okay, the most important thing we're doing is give you that recreatable first night in Minecraft. Give you that experience of surviving, building a cabin, surviving, but then giving you that broader, longer term view to give you a reason to keep playing and reliving that experience. And I think it's going to be the first time that the survival PvE genre has seen that level of treatment.
Which probably leads me to a good question about hype. So between game devs and the community and expectations and hype, you two are probably better poised than a lot to comment on managing those expectations and I guess being transparent in a way to move forward when things aren't aligning the way you'd hope they were.
I mean, between us and Sean Murray over at Hello Games, we've all got our battle scars for that one.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that when someone tells you something, that comes with responsibility. So it's kind of challenging because if you want true, honest, genuine engagement with people, and I think if you look at Twitch, if you look at YouTube, I think, and social media in general, that's the most valuable thing, is being able to have genuine engagement with a community. And that comes with responsibility, because if you're going to genuinely go out there to the community and tell them what's going on, they need to be prepared to accept the reality of which is that you might change. A good example of a game I've been playing a lot of in early access, and a while ago on Twitter I said it was the best example for me, was a game called Stormworks, which I absolutely adore. And it's going 1.0 very soon. People should pick it up. Fantastic game. And it really is. And I've so enjoyed their process of going through early access. You know them. They're just an amazing team, and they've got a high level of engagement. And they've been really prepared to make the tough calls. They will make decisions as part of their game to remove parts. And the Project Zomboid team have been the same. They're making the bold calls. Gary made super bold calls with Rust, to go back in and redo everything. And that's what's awesome about Gary. He makes these really he decides something and he does them. And I think that's a really good attribute in a leader, is to do that. And he's certainly been a big career inspiration for me about how to approach things and stuff like that. So I think that's a big part of it for me, is that, being able to have that genuine relationship with the community. You also need to sort of temper that with, are the community going to understand and be able to appreciate what I'm telling them?
I'm going to be pragmatic and honest, and there was a lot of whiplash from me. There were times where I would write things up and I would be too honest and blunt, like, you're not going to get this or this, this is why. And to a degree, people do want some excitement. They do need a little bit of Dean's energy in that. I think it's been a lot of balancing, and continues to be for me to this day. And I'm very confident saying, going into Icarus, that the both of us, in the extremes that we both went, have found, I think, a more middle ground, balanced approach. We're both very excited and interested in, again, engaging directly with the community. Much like talking, when you're writing mods and deal with the mods, being very excited about directly relating to them, getting feedback, iterating off of that. And, I don't think either of us are going to be, up on stage saying it has to be out by the end of the year again.
But I mean, that statement was true.
It did have to be.
So it did have to achieve what we wanted. It had to be, and we failed. And I think that being able to recognise when you failed at something is really important. And I think that's maybe the nuance that a lot of people miss. I think a big lesson has been to get excited and get hyped about things that exist. Mm-hmm. And at times that can seem a little boring. So when I think about the launch, and we did that kind of here, the pre-recording for it, I feel like it was quite low energy. But it was low energy because I was just in a zone with, let's just focus on what's working. We'd go through the milestones. We'd be like, okay, how did we do? How does that mechanic, were our assumptions correct? It was kind of very boring in its simplicity. Who would have thought that making plans and hiring the best people and being very clear about what you're going to do would work? I mean, everybody, always. So in a way, the project's been kind of boring in that sense. But I think it's the culmination of our careers, basically, of going through and gestating. What are those feelings that we're trying to capture with survival, and how can we deliver those?
Yeah, I would definitely say, not to run this question on too much, but where in the past I might get super excited about an upcoming feature or some new content that is down the pipe. More so today, I'm definitely getting, my approach is to more get excited about the feelings that I know I already have. Going again to talking about the stuff with that playtest. I'm excited about that feeling. And you really don't have to worry about that, smashing in your face nearly as much as finding out that an engineer massively underestimated their work.
So, I mean, now that we're talking about it, Chris, it got announced at PC Game Show 4 months ago.
Oh, wow.
How's it tracking?
Yeah, so we sort of debated whether we were going to do that, but I think it was good for us to get out there and good for the team as well. So much of the buzz of making games and a part of it, it's not really so much about the money. It's definitely about the being part. I love releasing stuff. I go crazy. Like, it's definitely, I went completely crazy. I'm having to apologize to some people at pretty much every time I release a game. But yeah, it's a huge emotional thing. No matter what the game is, you go through this moment. And I think you were saying, Brendan went through this when he released PUBG. You wonder whether anyone's going to buy it at all. I remember with DayZ Standalone, I had that fear. I was like, what if nobody, not even one person buys it? But basically, it's been tracking really well. We've stuck to our milestones, and we're challenging and testing those assumptions and staying true to the pillars of the game. And we've got to that point. We're running around in a variety of biomes, trying to make the biomes look and feel cool, introduce the tension in the game, trying to survive in that emotion. And I think we're delivering through on that.
So where can people go to find out more about it?
So, we're really trying to pick up that community engagement. The best place for people to go for now is surviveicarus.com. It has links to Discord, the usual things like Instagram and stuff like that. But we are really hoping to open up the development. We really want to focus on showing people what we have. So getting hyped about what's there, not getting hyped about what's to come. And I think that's helpful for us as well as the community.
It's a lot of fun as well. I think some of my fondest memories of releasing a game with you was just playing on stream.
Oh, and I love talking about it with people afterwards. And that was the real fun part of Stationeers for me, is actually, and we've got this amazing relationship with the community. They go in and tell us directly in the code what needs to be fixed. And I'd love to see if we can do that at a higher level. Stationeers is a small niche game. So we have friendships with a lot of the key people in the community. We play video games, we hang out in Discord with them. That was the best part of DayZ the mod. I'd love to see us be able to do that again with the survival genre. We're just so passionate about it. Just so much of my time is spent playing and living that, even in my real life and things I do in real life. So being able to return to that and do it with the community would be fantastic.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for your time. I can't wait to see what comes next in the survival genre and what comes up with Icarus.